Dear chosen ones, you know that feeling, that quiet, frustrating ache when you're the smartest person in the room but no one wants to acknowledge it. When you can see the truth so clearly that it's almost painful, yet the people around you choose to mock, minimize, or ignore it. You felt that sting more times than you can count. But now the entire town is choking on the taste of their own words. They're scrambling, backpedaling, and awkwardly revising their stories as the truth of your genius erupts into full view. Suddenly, the one they laughed at is the one they're quoting. The one they dismissed is the one they now need. And beloved, the humility hitting them now, it's not casual, it's epic. But before we dive into the wildfire of embarrassment sweeping through the same people who once questioned you, let me take a moment to say thank you, truly, to every one of you who's been supporting this message, this movement, especially those of you who've shown love through the Super Thanks feature. Your support is deeply appreciated. Whether you've donated financially or simply shared your energy, your comments, and your time, it all matters. And let's be clear, even if you never donate a dime, you are still seen, valued, and honored. This community doesn't thrive because of money. It thrives because of alignment, truth, and the chosen ones finding each other. So, thank you for being here. Every word you read, every 777 you drop in the comments, helps push this message into the hands of someone else who needs to wake up to who they are. Now, let's get into it. Because what's happening right now is so much bigger than a few quiet apologies. This is a full-blown reversal. For months, maybe even years, you've carried the weight of being too much, too deep, too advanced, too precise. You felt the subtle digs in meetings when your ideas were just a little out there. You noticed how your suggestions were skipped over, only to be regurgitated by someone else months later. You remember the polite smiles that masked condescension, the forced laughs that followed your bold insights, and you felt it in your bones. They didn't get it. Not because you were wrong, but because they weren't ready. And now, the room has flipped. The whispers are louder than ever, but this time they're whispering your name with respect. They're whispering your name with regret, because everything you warned about, everything you predicted, everything you spoke from that deep well of divine intelligence, it's unfolding right in front of their eyes. You didn't just call it, you saw it with precision, and now their embarrassment isn't just quiet discomfort. It's the talk of the town. Comment 777 if you already feel this message hitting home, because the moment is here, the apologies are stacking, the recognition is spreading, and the brilliance they once called weird, negative, or too intense, they now call it essential. Get ready, chosen one. They're not just saying sorry, they're about to reposition you. And trust me, you were never the problem, you were the answer. God's chosen ones. The whole town is embarrassed. They just realized you're a genius and apologizing. You've always been the one to raise a hand and ask, but what if we're looking at this the wrong way? You were the one brave enough to speak up when silence was easier. The one who asked hard questions, not to challenge for attention, but because something deep inside you was vibrating with truth. And what did they do? They laughed. They rolled their eyes. They dismissed you as overly complicated, too intense, or even a threat to their comfort zone. But now, the very same people who thought you were being dramatic are quietly re-evaluating every word you spoke. Why? Because reality is finally catching up to the truth you tried to share. Chosen one, have you noticed the energy shifting? Those whispers once used to mock you are being recycled into silent apologies. People are starting to realize that the very wisdom they avoided was their salvation in disguise. Have you ever wondered why you were always the one feeling like the odd one out? the one who couldn't just go with the flow. Because you weren't meant to flow with the crowd, you were meant to disrupt the current. While others see what's directly in front of them, you see 10 steps ahead. While they get high off the approval of the crowd, your soul is tuned into divine timing. That's not arrogance, it's spiritual intelligence. In a world obsessed with instant gratification, your foresight feels like an inconvenience. But now that the consequences have arrived and things are unraveling exactly how you predicted, people can't ignore it anymore. Let me ask you something. How many times have you spoken the truth in a room that wasn't ready to hear it? How many times did you feel that strange heaviness in your spirit, sensing something wrong, even when everyone else seemed thrilled? That wasn't paranoia. That was discernment. That was your spiritual radar activating. Remember when you warned your team at work about a deal that felt off, only to be ignored, and then months later, the fallout hit hard? Or how about that time you told your sibling that their partner wasn't who they appeared to be? And now they're sitting in heartbreak, wondering how you saw what they missed. One of the most famous examples of this gift of early insight is Nostradamus. Ridiculed in his time, yet respected centuries later, his foresight has been studied by scholars and skeptics alike. Another example, Harriet Tubman. She had an inner knowing, spiritual guidance that helped her lead enslaved people through dangerous territory. People didn't understand how she just knew when to move or when to wait. But chosen ones like you operate on that same frequency. Do not judge by appearances, but judge with right judgment. John 7:24. You've lived this verse without even realizing it. You've judged not by what's obvious, but by what's true. While others fell for charm and surface-level signals, you saw right through to character, to motive, to energy. And that made people nervous. Why? Because your presence revealed what they were trying to hide, not just from others, but from themselves. You are not too much. You are too accurate. You're not difficult. You're deeply tuned in. And now, those who once made you feel like a burden are slowly waking up to the reality that you were their early warning system. Chosen one, can you feel that weight lifting off your shoulders? It's not just healing, it's justice. Justice in the form of recognition. Justice in the form of quiet apologies and humbled hearts. And while many may never say the words, their actions speak volumes. They ask for your opinion now. They listen longer when you speak. They hesitate before dismissing your concerns. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make straight your paths. Proverbs 3:5-6. This is what you've been doing all along, trusting your God-given instincts even when no one else could validate them. And now the paths are becoming straight, not just for you, but for those who doubted you. Think of Nikola Tesla, a genius ahead of his time, ridiculed for ideas people couldn't yet comprehend, ideas that power the very technology we rely on today. He wasn't loud, but he was precise, just like you. Or take Joan of Arc, guided by divine visions in a time when a young woman's insight was considered madness. She defied empires because she trusted the voice of God over the voice of man. You're part of this same spiritual legacy, the misunderstood now, the honored later. What would happen if you finally stopped doubting your insight just because others couldn't see what you see? What would shift in your life if you fully stepped into your genius without waiting for applause? Call to me and I'll answer you and will tell you great and hidden things that you have not known. Jeremiah 33:3. God has been whispering these things to you in dreams, in nudges, in sudden insights that came out of nowhere. But they didn't come from nowhere. They came from divine intelligence entrusted to you for a purpose. Think of Steve Jobs, whose vision was mocked until it revolutionized the world. He didn't build Apple because he followed the crowd. He built it because he saw differently. Sound familiar? You don't just think outside the box. You were born outside of it. And now the town that once underestimated you is realizing they miscalculated badly. Their silence is no longer judgment, it's reflection. Their distance isn't superiority, it's humility. The same voices that once gossiped are quieter now because the evidence is too loud. As it is written, the stone that the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. Psalm 118, verse 22. You are that stone, rejected, misunderstood, dismissed, but now essential, necessary, central. Your genius wasn't for vanity, it was for purpose. And now that purpose is revealing itself in undeniable ways. Right now, chosen one, there are conversations happening behind closed doors, and you are the center of them. But for once, these aren't the conversations meant to question your intentions, belittle your perspective, or ridicule your insight. No, this time the tone is different, uncomfortable, reflective, regretful. People who once rolled their eyes at your warnings are now citing your words in meetings, almost verbatim. That same person who called your instincts dramatic is now telling their spouse, I should have listened when they said something didn't feel right. Can you feel the shift in the atmosphere? What used to be dismissal is now dawning realization. And that realization, it stings, because it's not just that you were right, it's that they were loudly wrong. How many times have you been the only voice of caution in a room full of enthusiasm? How many times did your quiet warnings get drowned out by louder, more popular opinions? And now, how many of those very people are circling back, not just with questions, but with confessions? This isn't just embarrassment, it's accountability knocking on their door. They're remembering every moment they made you feel like your insight didn't matter. They're replaying times they talked over you, laughed under their breath, or shifted uncomfortably when you spoke the truth they didn't want to hear. Because the truth is, they knew. Somewhere deep down, they knew your words held weight. But it was easier to mock than to admit their own blindness. Consider Galileo Galilei, once condemned for his ideas, imprisoned for telling the truth about the solar system. Yet today, his insights are celebrated as groundbreaking. Or think of Amanda Gorman, whose powerful poetry was initially underestimated, but later silenced entire rooms with its undeniable truth. Like them, you're a mirror. Your presence forced people to confront what they weren't ready to see in themselves. A prophet is not without honor, except in his own town, among his relatives and in his own home. Mark 6:4. That's not just a verse, it's your biography. You were the warning they chose to ignore, the wisdom they refused to value. And now the echo of that mistake is bouncing back louder than ever. But here's where it gets even more divine. This awakening won't stay private. No, this isn't the kind of guilt that people bury and forget. This is the kind that demands to be addressed. The embarrassment of misjudging someone so deeply, of mocking the very person sent to protect them, is about to break out into the open. What happens when an entire community finally realizes they underestimated a genius? What happens when the crowd sees that the problem was actually the solution all along? They don't just whisper apologies, they start issuing them publicly with urgency and volume. Chosen one, get ready, because your name is about to be restored in places where it was once slandered. Your character is about to be honored in spaces that once questioned your sanity, and the apologies coming your way aren't performative, they're transformational. When a man's ways please the Lord, he makes even his enemies to be at peace with him. Proverbs 16:7. These people aren't just sorry for being wrong, they're sorry for how they handled being wrong. The shift isn't just about perception, it's about repentance. Let's make this real. Imagine that manager who used to ignore your emails now quoting your analysis in a meeting and giving you full credit, unprompted. Or that colleague who always challenged your ideas, finally standing up, and saying, "They were right from the beginning." This kind of redemption doesn't just restore your confidence, it rewrites your legacy in that environment. And it doesn't stop there. Think about Malala Yousafzai, silenced by her enemies, doubted by her peers, but eventually honored globally for her wisdom and courage. Or Nelson Mandela, imprisoned for years by those who feared his vision, only to be embraced later by the very nation that once rejected him. These are not just feel-good stories, they are living proof of divine vindication. And now, you stand on the edge of your own moment of justice. Some of the apologies you'll receive won't be formal. They may come as invitations to speak, unexpected praise, or long overdue recognition. Others will be deeply personal. A friend who once thought you were too intense will pull you aside and say, "You were right about them." A sibling who once laughed off your concern will message you in tears, saying, "I should have believed you." And here's the powerful part. They're not just acknowledging the wisdom in your words. They're repenting for the way they treated you when you delivered those words. Have you ever asked yourself, why did it hurt so much when they didn't listen? It wasn't pride, it was purpose. You weren't trying to be the smartest in the room. You were trying to protect them from what you saw coming. If any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask God, who gives generously to all without reproach. James 1:5. That wisdom was given to you, freely, abundantly, supernaturally, but they rejected not just your words. They rejected the gift inside you. And now, they're reckoning with that decision. So what will happen when that apology finally reaches your ears? When the very voices that once silenced you now praise your name? Will you recognize the full circle moment? Will you allow yourself to receive the restoration, not out of spite, but with grace? The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still. Exodus 14:14. You didn't need to prove them wrong. You just needed to stay true. And that's exactly what you did. You are not the same person who once walked out of those rooms feeling small. You've grown, you've transformed. And now, the very people who contributed to your isolation are becoming witnesses to your revelation. They're realizing they weren't dealing with an ordinary person. They were encountering someone chosen, anointed, appointed, someone who carried insight their world wasn't ready for until now. The apologies were only the opening act. What's about to unfold next, chosen one, is something far more powerful and far-reaching. The undeniable recognition of your true intelligence. For far too long, people have mislabeled your brilliance. They looked at your silence and called it uncertainty. They mistook your reflective nature for hesitation. They saw your concern and called it negativity. But here's what they missed. Your mind wasn't behind, it was beyond. While they were reacting to what was in front of them, you were already calculating what came next. And now, the fog is lifting. Slowly, then all at once, people are beginning to see that what they used to mock was actually evidence of depth, wisdom, and vision they didn't have the capacity to understand at the time. Let me ask you something. How many times were you made to feel less than because your process didn't fit the mold, because you needed more time to sit with a decision, or because your questions disrupted the groupthink? This world rewards those who are fast and flashy, not those who are precise and prophetic. But that's what you are. Prophetic, measured, deep. The very qualities they called paranoia are now being redefined as pattern recognition. Your caution wasn't fear, it was spiritual foresight. Consider Albert Einstein, who was labeled slow and even mentally challenged as a child because he didn't speak fluently until the age of 4. But his way of thinking wasn't broken, it was advanced. The same applies to you. The pace of your mind didn't fit their timelines because it was tuned into another dimension. You weren't built for quick assumptions. You were built for divine understanding. But God chose the foolish things of the world to shame the wise. God chose the weak things of the world to shame the strong. 1 Corinthians 1:27. They thought your method didn't make sense, but it wasn't supposed to. It wasn't built by them. It was assigned by God. Let's break this down. When everyone else celebrated a risky move, you were the one in the corner asking, but what's the long-term impact? When a new person walked in dripping with charm and charisma, you were the one who quietly said, something feels off. And when they called it overthinking, you were actually decoding patterns, motives, and energy dynamics that most people can't even detect. You've been reading undercurrents while others skimmed the surface. Can you see now why they were intimidated? Why they tried to silence you? Because if your intelligence was acknowledged, the entire structure of false certainty would collapse. Think of Marie Curie. She was dismissed, doubted, and denied access to opportunities simply because she saw and pursued what others couldn't yet understand. But history bowed to her persistence. Or Alan Turing, the mind behind modern computing, who was ridiculed and criminalized in his lifetime, only to later be celebrated as one of the greatest geniuses of all time. What made them legendary wasn't how loudly they spoke, it was how deeply they saw. You are part of that lineage, chosen one. You carry intelligence that threatens false comfort zones. Wisdom is the principal thing, therefore get wisdom, and with all thy getting get understanding. Proverbs 4:7. Your intelligence is wisdom, not just knowledge. It's spiritually sourced, not ego-driven. That's why it confused them. You weren't trying to win conversations. You were trying to warn them. And now that outcomes are unfolding exactly as you said they would, the recognition is no longer optional. It's unavoidable. Let me ask you this. What would your life look like if you stopped trying to shrink your intelligence just to be more digestible? What would happen if you let your mind shine without apology? The culture you've been moving through teaches that confidence looks like loud certainty, but your kind of intelligence walks differently. It's quiet in chaos. It's curious where others are arrogant. It's analytical when the crowd is impulsive. You didn't need to be right to feel validated, but now that you've been proven right over and over again, it's forcing people to reevaluate not only what they missed, but why they missed it. Your presence exposed gaps in their thinking, and instead of adapting, many of them chose to mock the messenger. But that's shifting now. Their pride is melting under the weight of undeniable truth. Consider Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. His insistence on nonviolence and spiritual grounding was mocked by radicals and conservatives alike. But time has vindicated his vision. The same will happen with yours. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and knowledge of the Holy One is understanding. Proverbs 9:10. Your intelligence flows from a sacred place. You're not just book smart or street smart, you're spirit smart. And that kind of knowing can't be taught in school. It's given, it's God-breathed. It's inherited from divine DNA. Even in childhood, you may have noticed how you observed more than you spoke, how you studied situations while others rushed into them, how you questioned rules others blindly followed. That wasn't rebellion. That was a revelation forming. And now that same analytical depth is no longer a mystery, it's a necessity. People are realizing they need minds like yours in the room. They need thinkers who can connect the spiritual and the strategic. Who can ask the question that no one else dares to ask? Who can challenge consensus not to stir drama, but to protect people from disasters they can't yet see? Think about Oprah Winfrey, told she wasn't fit for television, doubted for her style of interviewing, ridiculed for her spiritual angle, and yet she built an empire through emotional intelligence and discernment. That's the kind of genius you carry. one that was never meant to be conventional, one that was born to awaken others. The very people who once brushed you off for thinking too much are now circling back with a new level of respect in their tone. They're beginning to see that your so-called overthinking was never a flaw. It was a form of detailed discernment. What they mocked as overanalysis is now being recategorized in their minds as strategic insight. What they called pessimism is now being rightly seen as a grounded, realistic evaluation of risk. And your refusal to just go with the flow, it wasn't stubbornness. It was spiritual refusal to walk into danger with your eyes closed. Chosen one, this shift is no longer confined to private circles or quiet realizations. It's spreading, publicly, tangibly, and with undeniable momentum. Your reputation isn't just recovering, it's being rebuilt. But this time it's built on truth instead of the shaky scaffolding of other people's misunderstandings. Let me ask you something. How many times did you feel punished for simply seeing clearly? How often did you feel excluded because you voiced a concern nobody wanted to hear? It wasn't that you were negative, it was that you were tuned into a deeper wavelength. While others were dazzled by surface-level charm, you were reading between the lines. And now, those same people are realizing that your clarity was not only correct, it was crucial. This is no longer just about people you know. Word is spreading. Colleagues, friends, even people in your larger community are starting to recognize that you've been operating on another level all along. The same voice they once ignored is now being sought out for insight, for guidance, for clarity. Let the wise listen and add to their learning, and let the discerning get guidance. Proverbs 1:5. That's you, chosen one. You're not just smart, you're wise. And now, the wise are turning their ears toward you. Consider Greta Thunberg. Once dismissed as an overly emotional teenager, she's now regarded globally as a prophetic voice on environmental responsibility. Or Chadwick Boseman, who quietly carried a private battle with dignity and grace, while others underestimated his strength, only to be revered as one of the most profound actors of his generation after his passing. Like them, you are walking proof that just because people misunderstand you doesn't mean you are wrong. It means they weren't ready. But now they're ready, and they're showing it. Colleagues who used to sidestep your input are now making space for your voice at the table. They're asking for your opinion before making critical moves, not as a formality, but as a necessity. You've become a trusted source, a voice of foresight, a compass in times of confusion. Friends who once joked that you were too serious are now coming to you when it really counts. Because deep down, they know you see things others miss. Can you feel the energy shifting around you? Can you sense how people linger longer when you speak now? That's not your imagination. That's influence. That's spiritual authority being recognized in real time. Those who are wise will shine like the brightness of the heavens, and those who lead many to righteousness, like the stars forever and ever. Daniel 12:3. This light you carry, it was never meant to be hidden under someone else's misunderstanding. And now it's being seen in full clarity. The same community that once resisted your insight is now realizing they need it. Your discernment is being viewed as a vital resource. People are starting to realize that your depth is not intimidating, it's empowering. That your caution is not fear, it's protection. That your emotional intelligence is not weakness, it's warfare. And they want access to it. Not to control it, but to learn from it. Think of Serena Williams, doubted, criticized, and often painted as too intense or too emotional, until the world could no longer deny her mastery, her strategy, her genius. Like her, you're being redefined not by their past judgment, but by your ongoing consistency. You kept showing up, you kept speaking truth, and now they're catching up. Let me press a little deeper. Are you ready to own this moment? Are you ready to stop second-guessing the very qualities that make you powerful? Because those traits that once alienated you are now your elevation. Teach me good judgment and knowledge, for I believe in your commandments. Psalm 119:66. That's the prayer that's been operating in your life even before you had words for it. You've been trained by the Spirit to see with heavenly eyes. The people who once made you feel like a problem are now realizing you were the solution they ignored. And that realization is turning into action. They're not just respecting your mind now. They're honoring your presence. You're not just tolerated anymore. You're needed. This season isn't just about being vindicated. It's about stepping into your rightful role as a guide, a thinker, a seer. The next time someone says, "You always notice things I don't downplay it. The next time a room quiets when you begin to speak, don't rush your words. You've earned the silence. You've earned the platform. You've earned the right to be heard, not by demanding it, but by enduring every moment when you were overlooked and still choosing wisdom over revenge." But here's where your story, chosen one, takes a breathtaking, divine turn. It's not just that people are admitting you were right about a few things. They're beginning to comprehend the magnitude of what it meant for you to see what you saw when you saw it. They're starting to understand that what looked like lucky guesses or harmless warnings was actually something far deeper. Let me ask you, how many times did you feel alone because you noticed danger before it erupted? How many times were you burdened with knowledge you didn't ask for, insight you couldn't unsee? People called it paranoia. But now, with the benefit of hindsight, they're realizing it was prophetic clarity. And that kind of clarity isn't random. It's not coincidence. It's genius. Yes, that word, genius, is slowly, reverently beginning to attach itself to your name. Not the kind of genius that the world typically celebrates, not just academic or artistic or entrepreneurial, but a more rare and spiritual kind. The genius of pattern recognition, the genius of emotional and spiritual intelligence, the genius of understanding human nature at its core, what drives it, what deceives it, what heals it. You've had this capacity all along, but it's only now that others are catching up enough to see it. And not just one or two people, whole circles, entire communities. The ripple effect of your truth-telling is pushing against the boundaries of former judgment, dismantling old labels and replacing them with reverence. Do you remember how Joseph in the Bible was imprisoned for interpreting dreams others couldn't understand? Yet, when Pharaoh had a dream that none of his advisors could interpret, it was Joseph they summoned. And not only did Joseph interpret it, he offered a solution that saved an entire nation. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Since God has made all this known to you, there is no one so discerning and wise as you." Genesis 41:39. That's the shift that's happening for you. You were once the outlier, the misunderstood one, the dreamer. But now you're being called upon because no one else can see the future like you can. And just like that, people are moving through layers of revelation. First, they admit you were right in isolated moments. But then, as they reflect deeper, they recognize a pattern. You've been consistently right in moments that mattered most. And now comes the heaviest realization of all. The reason you've been right so consistently is not because of chance, but because of divine insight. The kind that most people don't have the capacity to understand until hindsight forces them to. Think about Malcolm X, once dismissed as too radical, too blunt, too dangerous. But years later, even his fiercest critics began to admit that much of what he said about society, power, and spiritual identity was stunningly accurate. Or take Jane Goodall, ridiculed early on for her empathetic approach to animal behavior, only to become one of the most celebrated and respected voices in science. These figures didn't change their truth to fit public comfort. The public had to evolve to catch up to them. That's exactly what's happening to you right now. The room didn't grow you. The room is just now realizing how small they were without your perspective. And it goes deeper. The very people who once called you too much, too intense, too sensitive, too analytical, are now realizing that the issue wasn't that you were too much. It's that they were not enough. Not enough depth to sit with complexity. Not enough emotional maturity to handle your honesty. Not enough willingness to look beyond the surface of things. Let me ask you this. How different would your journey have been if your insight had been received earlier? And yet maybe it happened exactly the way it needed to, because what's coming next is something most people never experience. Complete public vindication. Not partial, not subtle, not quietly behind closed doors. This is full circle. This is tables turning, narratives flipping, and the same mouths that once discredited you now speaking your name with reverence. No weapon that is formed against you shall prosper, and every tongue that shall rise against you in judgment you shall condemn. This is the heritage of the servants of the Lord. Isaiah 54:17. You're not just being proven right. You're being validated in judgment, in wisdom, in character. This season isn't about revenge, it's about recognition. Your reputation, once fragile under the weight of misunderstanding, is being rebuilt with bricks of truth. People are now saying, "We didn't understand them back then, but we do now." And it's not just professional acknowledgement, it's emotional and spiritual. They're seeing you not only as someone who sees clearly, but as someone who endured gracefully. Because, chosen one, while they were misjudging you, you weren't lashing out. You were waiting, learning, growing. You let your consistency tell the story, and now it's telling it louder than you ever could have. Consider Howard Thurman, the theologian and mystic behind so many civil rights movements. He was never the loudest voice in the room, but his influence shaped generations. His insight was once dismissed as too spiritual. Yet his quiet genius influenced leaders like Martin Luther King Jr. and changed history. That's the power of divine intelligence. It doesn't need to shout. It simply waits for the world to realize it can no longer be ignored. The vindication, chosen one, is not a singular moment. It's a rising tide. It doesn't come all at once. It rolls in gently at first, subtle yet undeniable. You'll begin to notice a new tone in the way people speak to you. They're not brushing off your insights anymore. They're leaning in. When you speak, they pause. They consider. They ask follow-up questions. They recall things you said weeks or even months ago. Things you thought they ignored or forgot are suddenly being referenced with reverence. That's not a coincidence. That's the evidence of transformation. Your words didn't go to waste. They landed, they lingered, and now they're echoing louder than ever in minds that once dismissed them. Then comes the second wave. You'll start hearing your name mentioned when you're not even in the room. Friends will report back to you that someone gave you credit in a conversation. A colleague will casually mention that your input was cited in a meeting you weren't invited to. Your insights are beginning to move without you. They're gaining weight, gaining traction, reshaping how people perceive you when you're not present. Have you ever longed for that kind of validation? Not just being heard, but being remembered. Not just tolerated, but trusted. Let someone else praise you and not your own mouth. An outsider and not your own lips. Proverbs 27:2. That scripture is manifesting in your life now. Your vindication is traveling on the wings of other people's voices. Finally comes the third wave, direct acknowledgement. Someone will walk up to you and say, "You were right. I should have listened." Another will message you out of the blue. "I see it now. You were the only one who warned me." And here's what makes this moment so sacred. This isn't just about soothing your ego. This is a spiritual repositioning. You're not just being vindicated, you're being redefined. You're moving from the edges to the center. From being seen as an outsider with inconvenient truths to being recognized as the wise one, the voice that was right all along. And that kind of shift can't be forced. It can only be earned through consistency, through integrity, through being faithful even when no one clapped. Think about Dr. Anthony Fauci, for example. For months he was questioned, criticized, even mocked, until the very data he pointed to began unfolding exactly as he said it would. Suddenly the narrative changed. The world moved from resistance to reliance. Or look at Brené Brown, whose emphasis on vulnerability was once considered soft and impractical, until corporations, leaders, and millions around the world realized it was the missing key to authentic leadership and emotional strength. Like them, your voice was ahead of its time. But time is catching up, and when it does, the story flips. Now, here's the most profound part of this transition. It's not just a few individuals changing how they view you. It's the entire system. The community dynamic is shifting. People who once excluded you from major discussions are now trying to find ways to bring you into decision-making rooms. Organizations that previously overlooked your expertise are now spotlighting it. Those social groups that made you feel like you didn't belong, they're suddenly inviting you in, not as a novelty, but as a necessity. Why is this happening now? Because the community is waking up to something powerful. Having someone like you around isn't optional, it's essential. You were never meant to just fit in. You were designed to see what others missed, to sense hidden dangers, to detect patterns buried beneath distractions. That's not overthinking, that's divine perception. For the Lord gives wisdom, from his mouth come knowledge and understanding. Proverbs 2:6. You've been carrying this gift all along. They're just finally ready to admit they need it. And here's the hard truth your community is beginning to wrestle with. They made preventable mistakes. They invested in the wrong people, trusted false images, and walked into chaos you could have helped them avoid, if only they had listened. Can you feel the weight of that? This isn't just acknowledgement, it's repentance. Their shift in behavior is their apology. Their invitation is their confession. They're not just bringing you to the table, they're making room for your voice at the head of the table. Look at Elon Musk. For years, people dismissed him as eccentric, unstable, unrealistic. But today, global industries are built on visions he saw decades before anyone else. Or Maya Angelou, whose voice was once silenced, then later amplified, to speak for millions. Like them, you're no longer being misread. You're being recontextualized. They finally see the value of the way your mind works. Does this sudden shift feel strange? Are you struggling to trust the new respect that's being offered to you? That's normal. After years of being dismissed, being valued for the same insights can feel surreal. But don't reject it. Don't downplay it. This is your divine positioning. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Psalm 23, verse 5. This is your table moment, not to gloat, but to lead. People who used to challenge your assessments are now requesting them before making any major moves. They're not asking for your opinion just to be polite. They're leaning on it. They're relying on it. And while that might feel like a sudden reversal, it's not. It's a correction, a holy recalibration of where you were always meant to be. You weren't designed to be sidelined. You weren't born to dim your voice in rooms that couldn't handle your light. You weren't meant to water down your insight to make others comfortable. You were made to lead with vision, to speak with clarity, and to protect through discernment. This new role isn't just a reward, it's a restoration. It's the spiritual fulfillment of every moment you were overlooked, every time you were misunderstood, and every hour you spent crying to God, wondering if anyone would ever see the truth in you. They see it now. And they're not just seeing what you saw, they're seeing who you've always been, the chosen one, the discerner, the voice of wisdom, the overlooked prophet who's now becoming the community cornerstone. And from here on out, your presence will no longer be a footnote. It will be the foundation. The people around you are finally waking up to what you've known all along, that the way you perceive the world, your intuitive, analytical, truth-sensitive way of seeing, is not a defect. It's your divine signature. Your so-called different perspective isn't a problem to be fixed. It's a gift the world desperately needs. You've been walking through life with eyes that can spot patterns, undercurrents, and warning signs before anyone else is even aware there's something brewing beneath the surface. For years they called it pessimism, but now they're calling it protection. They used to say your questions were disruptive. Now they're realizing those questions were necessary. Let me ask you, how many times have you second-guessed yourself simply because others couldn't keep up with what you saw clearly? That hesitation is ending, because what's happening now is a full-blown transformation, not just in how people see you, but in how they speak about you when you're not around. Word is spreading, stories are circulating. People who've never even met you are starting to hear about that one person who always seems to know what's really going on. That person who predicted the fallout. That person who warned everyone before it collapsed. This is the ripple effect of recognition. And it's not just reshaping your reputation, it's rewriting your legacy. Think of Vincent van Gogh, who sold only one painting in his lifetime and was seen as unstable. Today, the world recognizes him as one of history's greatest artistic minds. Or Katherine Johnson, the NASA mathematician whose calculations helped send astronauts to space, yet she spent years being ignored in meetings she should have been leading. Now her name is synonymous with brilliance. Like them, you were never wrong, you were just ahead. And the ripple of your impact is now being felt in rooms you've never stepped foot in. Your name is becoming a signal of wisdom. Your insights are being passed along, quoted, referenced, and remembered. And because of that, doors that were previously sealed shut are now beginning to unlock. Opportunities that seemed unreachable, job positions, collaborations, leadership roles, invitations into influential circles, are finding their way to you. Why? Because now people understand your value. They're finally seeing what you bring to any room you enter. They're realizing that in a world obsessed with superficial charm, your ability to see the invisible is priceless. A man's gift makes room for him and brings him before great men. Proverbs 18:16. That's not theory anymore. It's prophecy manifesting. But we have to address the unspoken reality behind this shift. The deep, lingering embarrassment. The quiet shame. This isn't just light-hearted regret. This is the heavy, soul-deep realization that they didn't just ignore your wisdom, they undermined it. And worse, they undermined you. This is not about a mistake in judgment. It's about realizing they were part of a system, a mindset, a chorus of voices that made you feel like the issue was your perception, not their ignorance. They're not just sorry they didn't listen. They're ashamed they tried to silence you. And let's be honest, some of those memories still sting. You remember the laughter after your warning was dismissed, the sarcastic remarks when you raised a concern, the deliberate exclusions from conversations where your input could have made a difference. They're remembering too. In fact, those who were the most vocal in their rejection of you are now the ones feeling the most exposed. They stood on the wrong side of wisdom, loudly. They trusted what was easy over what was accurate. They called your discernment inconvenient. Now they're realizing it was sacred. So here you are, chosen one, standing at a powerful crossroads. You've waited so long for this moment. You could demand retribution. You could insist on recognition and watch them squirm in their guilt. You could use this as a moment of reversal to make them feel what you felt. But that's not who you are. Because the wisdom God gave you doesn't stop at insight. it extends to grace. Be kind to one another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another, as God in Christ forgave you. Ephesians 4:32. This is where you show them that the same gift they once rejected is the same gift that will redeem them. This doesn't mean pretending you weren't hurt. It doesn't mean denying the years of loneliness, the frustration, the wondering if you should have stayed quiet just to avoid the backlash. It means you no longer carry the wound as your identity. You carry the lesson, you carry the healing. And now, the same people who discredited you are coming back, not to validate you, but to learn from you. Let's pause here. What kind of leader do you want to be in this season of vindication? Because it's not just your chance to be right, it's your chance to lead. People are watching, not just what you said then, but how you respond now. Will you be gracious or guarded? Will you open the door wider or stand in it holding a grudge? The truth is, chosen one, your ability to see patterns was never meant to make you superior. It was meant to make you a steward of truth. And now you get to steward this moment, not from ego, but from elevation. Think about Nelson Mandela, who forgave the very people who imprisoned him, then led the nation that once rejected him. Or Princess Diana, who turned the world's ridicule into compassion by using her spotlight to bring attention to causes others ignored. These weren't just people with intelligence, they were people with grace, and now you get to follow in that legacy. So, will you accept this moment for what it is? A divine repositioning, a spiritual full circle, a testament to your consistency and character. People are not only acknowledging your insight, they're depending on it. You're no longer the inconvenient truth teller in the back row. You are the trusted voice at the center. You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. Genesis 50:20. The pain you endured was not pointless. It preserved you for this. And now, the community that once shut you out is leaning in. Not just because you were right, but because they finally see you clearly. They finally understand that your mind isn't just different, it's divinely wired. Your voice isn't just sharp, it's necessary. Your presence isn't just welcome, it's essential. And most of all, your heart, though bruised, still chooses to lead with grace. That's what makes you chosen. That's what makes you unforgettable. That's what makes you unstoppable. What's unfolding right now in your life, chosen one, isn't just the sweet justice of being proven right. It's the sacred initiation into your next divine assignment. This isn't merely vindication for past insights. This is the unveiling of a completely new chapter, one that's been hidden in your spirit for years, waiting for the right season to emerge. You are no longer in the chapter where your gifts were misunderstood, buried under doubt, or dismissed as inconvenient. You are stepping into the era where those very gifts are being recognized as essential. The outsider who saw too much. You're now becoming the insider whose vision will guide the room. Doesn't it feel different now when you speak and people actually pause to listen? You've spent so much time carrying the weight of wisdom in silence, holding back truth to avoid confrontation, downplaying insight to stay relatable. But that season is over. What used to make others uncomfortable is now making them lean in with interest. That divine perspective you carried quietly is now rising to the surface because people finally understand how much they need it. For such a time as this, Mordecai said to Esther, Esther 4:14, and the same is true for you. Everything that once felt like rejection was simply preparation for a time when your voice would be recognized as revelation. But with this recognition comes a sacred responsibility. People are going to begin depending on your discernment in ways they never have before. Your words will shape direction. Your insight will influence decisions. Your presence will shift dynamics in rooms you used to tiptoe into. And while this responsibility may feel heavy at times, it's also liberating. Why? Because you no longer have to shrink to protect fragile egos. You no longer have to dilute your truth to avoid discomfort. The people who once rolled their eyes are now turning their chairs toward you, asking, "What do you see?" Let's reflect. How many times did you bite your tongue to avoid conflict? How many times did you soften your truth just to be heard? Those days are over. This next chapter is marked by freedom. You are free to speak boldly. You are free to be exact. You are free to be fully seen as the seer you've always been. Now the Lord is the Spirit, and where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom. 2 Corinthians 3:17. That freedom is not just spiritual, it's social, emotional, and intellectual, and it's yours now. Consider Angela Davis, long vilified for her radical clarity, later celebrated as one of the most profound thinkers of her generation, or Stephen Hawking, whose mind was doubted by many early on, until the same people found themselves citing his theories and depending on his predictions. Their brilliance was not made visible by applause, it was made visible by consistency. And like them, you've reached a point where your consistency has become impossible to ignore. And now comes the divine reversal. The very community that once made you feel out of place is becoming the environment where you are most needed. Let that sink in. The tables have turned, and not out of revenge, but out of revelation. They're not just acknowledging your insight, they're finally ready to trust it. This isn't just personal vindication, this is spiritual promotion. Humble yourselves before the Lord, and He will lift you up. James 4:10. You humbled yourself while they doubted you. Now God is lifting you to the very position where your insight can serve the most people. But don't be surprised if this transition feels strange at first. After years of bracing for rejection, it might feel surreal to be welcomed, even celebrated, for your truth. That's okay. It means you were faithful in the hidden place. And now, what was cultivated in private is being honored in public. The voice that once caused tension is now a source of direction. The questions that once made others uncomfortable are now being recognized as necessary guides. Think of Fred Rogers. Yes, Mr. Rogers. His quiet, emotionally intelligent message was once considered too gentle, too slow, too sincere for television, but generations later, we now know it was exactly what the world needed. Just like your truth. Just like your tone. Just like your timing. You're no longer ahead of your time. You're in your time. And with it comes access. Access to rooms you once prayed about, influence over systems that once ignored you, and relationships that once felt out of reach. So let me ask you, are you ready to step fully into this role without guilt, without apology, and without hesitation? Are you ready to own the fact that your vision isn't just accurate, it's divinely appointed? Because now people aren't just saying you were right, they're saying we need you. And that shift from tolerated to trusted is the foundation of your new season. This is what vindication looks like for a chosen one. It's not just about proving the doubters wrong. It's about being elevated to a position where your wisdom is no longer a whisper in the dark. It's a beacon of light for others. It's not about having the last word. It's about finally being heard, fully, clearly, authentically. The Lord shall make you the head and not the tail. You shall be above only and not be beneath. Deuteronomy 28:13. That's not just a promise. That's your present reality. So walk boldly, chosen one. This isn't just a new chapter. This is the part of your story where the misunderstood becomes the guide, the dismissed becomes the discerned, and the outsider becomes the cornerstone. The waiting is over. The world is listening, and your time has finally come. Beloved, your time of being misunderstood is ending, and not quietly, but unmistakably. Your time of being seen clearly, deeply, and honorably is finally beginning. You've walked through seasons where your insight was questioned, your caution dismissed, your vision labeled as too much. But chosen one, every tear you shed in silence, every moment you wrestled with the weight of truth no one else could see, it was not in vain. You've carried wisdom like fire in your bones, even when it burned. And now the very people who once tried to douse that flame are gathering around it for warmth and direction. Can you feel it? Can you sense that you're no longer being tolerated, but trusted? You're no longer being watched with suspicion. You're being welcomed as a pillar of clarity in a confused world. And the beauty is, this isn't just about you. It's about the collective awakening of a community that almost missed its miracle. You are the living lesson in what happens when truth is ignored, but you're also the grace-filled example of what can happen when truth is finally honored. The apologies? They're not just trickling in, they're forming a wave, not just of regret, but of genuine change. They've felt the sting of dismissing the one who had the answers all along. And now they're shifting, rewriting the narrative, restoring your name, and realigning with the truth they once rejected. But let's be clear, this moment of vindication didn't come cheaply. You paid for it in patience. You paid for it in lonely nights when you asked God, "Why do I see what no one else sees?" You paid for it by holding your tongue when you could have lashed out, by extending grace when mockery would have been easier. And yet you stayed the course. You stayed in your integrity. And now, because you didn't break, you're breaking through. What you endured in silence is now being shouted in recognition. What you carried alone is now being carried forward by a community that has finally woken up to the gift they have in you. And beloved, don't be surprised when strangers begin to approach you with reverence, not because they know your full story, but because they've heard your impact. Your wisdom is traveling, your story is spreading. You're becoming the example of what it looks like when someone is divinely aligned and finally acknowledged. From margins to center, from dismissed to discerned, from silence to spotlight. This isn't just restoration. This is resurrection. Let me ask you something. Can you receive this moment fully without guilt? Can you allow yourself to stand tall, not in pride, but in truth? Because this chapter doesn't require you to defend yourself anymore. It asks you to lead. The very instincts you once second-guessed will now be sought out. The questions you used to soften will now be celebrated, and the voice you once had to fight to share will now be a voice that others protect, because they finally learned what happens when they don't listen. As we close this message, I want to say this from the bottom of my heart. Thank you. Thank you for walking this journey with faith. Thank you for standing firm, even when it hurt. Thank you for being the kind of person who didn't let bitterness take root, even when betrayal knocked on your door. You are the reason this message exists, because your story isn't just powerful, it's prophetic. It's a blueprint for others like you who have been wondering if they're the only ones. You're not, and your breakthrough is blazing a trail for them to follow. If this message has resonated with you, I invite you to support this space through a super thanks donation. It helps us keep creating content that speaks life, truth, and encouragement into the hearts of God's chosen ones all over the world. But whether you donate or not, please know this. You are appreciated deeply. Just your presence here, your energy, your time, it means everything. The comments you leave, the love you pour into this space, the way you share this with others, it's sacred. We're building something real here, and you are a part of it. So if you feel led to give, thank you. And if not, you are still cherished, supported, and honored. Your journey matters here. Your healing matters here. Your voice matters here. As you go forward into this new chapter, I bless you. I bless your voice, that it will no longer be silenced. I bless your vision, that it will no longer be questioned but sought after. I bless your presence, that it will draw the right people, the right opportunities, and the right alignment into your life. May you never again have to shrink to be accepted. May your name be spoken in rooms of influence with reverence and truth. May you walk in rooms where your insight is valued, your spirit is honored, and your presence is recognized as the divine appointment it truly is. The Lord will make you the head and not the tail, above only and not beneath, if you listen to the commandments of the Lord your God. Deuteronomy 28:13. Chosen one, you listened, you obeyed. And now you rise, your time has come. Your light is seen. And the best part, this is only the beginning. Let the town whisper. Let the critics remember. Let the wise gather. Because your legacy is unfolding right in front of them, and it's louder than any apology they'll ever offer. Now, beloved, take a breath, stand tall, and walk boldly into everything God has prepared for you. The door is open, and it has your name on it.